Hello, I'm Otto Penzler, and I'm in my office at the Mysterious Bookshop in Manhattan. And we're going to talk about collecting today, as we do every Wednesday afternoon, although I know most people see it at another time. And the author that we're going to focus on today is Donald Westlake. Don Westlake is, I think it's safe to say, was the greatest humorous writer of mystery fiction who ever lived, taking nothing away from other wonderful humorous writers. But whenever a new writer came along who was trying to be a humorous writer, whose focus was humor, the publisher and reviewers would always say, he's as good as Donald Westlake, or he's the new Donald Westlake, or he's better than Donald Westlake. He was the standard by which humorous writers were judged. We became very, very good friends early on in my old bookshop on 56th West 56th Street. He built, along with Brian Garfield, the bookshelves. He came over. This is a guy who could do anything. He renovated his own townhouse in the West Village. I went to interview him one time before we knew each other really well, and there were no floors. I had to walk on 2x4 beams that were that because he was replacing the floor in his townhouse. He was published by, most of the writers that I've been showing you have had a publisher for much of their career. Don had written more than 100 books, and as a result, he had been published by virtually every publisher in America and elsewhere. He was most famous for his Dortmunder series. John Dortmunder, who made his first appearance in The Hot Rock, which became a very successful film with Robert Redford and with a screenplay by William Goldman. And Dortmunder was a brilliant criminal. Not violent, he would never hurt anybody, but he was a burglar and who figured out the most intricate schemes to break into people's homes or businesses or banks, and everything went wrong. No fault of his, everything went wrong. Of the 100 books that Westlake wrote, more than 20 featured John Dortmunder, sometimes known as John Archibald Dortmunder, and they were among his most successful and most popular books. One of the Dortmunders that he was writing the Hot Rock came about, the first one, because he was writing a book as Richard Stark. He had numerous pseudonyms, the most famous of which is Richard Stark, where his main character was a professional thief named Parker. They were very hard-boiled, very different from the books that he wrote as Westlake. And he was writing a Richard Stark book about Parker, who's planning a heist or a break-in of some kind. And things started to go wrong for him. And Westlake thought he was trying to write this hard-boiled book, and then found, oh, wait a minute, this is getting to be funny. And because it got funny, he actually wrote a funny book with a new character, and it was The Hot Rock, and it was the first Dortmunder book. I'll show you a couple of books. One of the publishers that he had was Viking. And when he wrote Kahawa, which it sounds like today, like that's the worst title ever, because nobody could remember Kahawa. Well, it turns out Kahawa is the Ugandan word for coffee. And the story that he was writing was a heist to steal virtually the entire coffee crop of Uganda. It was, I know, apparently there's a train, if I'm understanding all of this correctly, apparently there's a huge train that goes for forever, in which all the farmers brought their coffee, and they brought it to this one train. which was taking it all the way to wherever it was going. And this gang of thieves decided they were going to steal the whole coffee crop. This was Don's favorite book that he ever wrote. And he thought that this was his breakout book. He was always a successful writer, but he was never a New York Times bestseller. And he thought this book, twice as long as most of his books, and a brilliant plot, was his great achievement. And it was published by Viking, who had been publishing him for a little while. And when they only published a very modest number of books, kind of the same number of books that they had been publishing for his smaller, less ambitious novels, he became very upset with them. He was no longer a happy author. And so he delivered a book to them which they rejected. It was not a mystery. It was called A Likely Story. It has this band around it. In our bookshop, at the Mysterious Bookshop, we put these bands around books that are signed so that you can see on the shelf which books have been signed. We have more signed books than bands, so we're not universally accurate about that. But this was it was originally called A Christmas Story, and it's a publishing story, a very funny humor story about publishing a book called A Christmas Story. And they rejected it because it was anti-publishing. They didn't like that. It wasn't a mystery. They didn't like that. And I read it, and this was in the very early years of the Mysterious Press. And I said, Don, this is a hilarious book. I'll publish it. And he said, well, it's not a mystery. I said, I know, I just read it. So what I'll do is I'll start a new publishing company for you called Penzler Books, which was an imprint at the Mysterious Press. And that imprint also was used for Patricia Highsmith, who said, I'm not a mystery writer. Of course she was a mystery writer. She just didn't want to be identified as one. So she was published under Penzler Books as well. So this is the first book I published by Don Westlake, and wound up publishing him for the rest of his life. I'm very proud of that. And the original painting for this hangs in my house in the country because I thought it was such a charming painting. 3 pairs of legs. I just want to point out it's a romantic triangle as well as a great publishing book. Castle in the Air. Why was I mentioning this book? This is being reissued by Hard Case Crime. And so here's the original first edition of this. This is one of the books that Hard Case Crime has been reissuing. They published several of Don Westlake's books, one of which was a paperback original posthumously called Memory, which I published in the Mysterious Bookshop, not a Mysterious Press, but we only had the permission to do a small number of copies, 200 copies, which we did publish in the bookshop. And as I said, it was posthumous, so we never had signed copies. So, mentioning the Richard Stark books, here's one, Butcher's Moon. And what was interesting, many interesting things about them. They were filmed, of course. Many of them became movies. Robert De Niro was in one. In fact, of his books, more than 20 have been filmed. Bank Shot, which we have here, Cops and Robbers, of course, Hot Rock, as I mentioned before. The Stark books started out as paperback originals. Even though Westlake was, when he was writing crime fiction, was published in hardcover, he was being published, the Stark novels were being published as paperback originals. I don't have any at the moment because when I get them, they sell fairly quickly because Richard Stark and Donald Westlake are both very collected. But one of the things that happened was they became popular in England. And so in England, they were published in hardcover as well as in paperback. Eventually, he got into hardcover with the Richard Stark books. But Allison and Busby did a long series of these books in the UK, and we do have signed copies of some of those books, highly collected as the first hardcover edition, in addition to people who collect the true first, which is the paperbacks. Some people don't like collecting paperbacks, even though they're the true firsts. So the hardcovers by Allison and Busby are quite popular here. He wrote, as I said, under numerous names. This was a one-off that he wrote as Kurt Clark. And it's a suspense novel, but it's set in the future. So it's generally, it looks like and is generally described as a science fiction novel, which it is because it's futuristic, but in fact, it's a crime novel. And it's a difficult book to get in really nice shape because nobody's took good care of reading science fiction paperback originals. So they stick them in their back pocket or, go take to the beach. And so to find a nice copy like this is pretty unusual. He also wrote as Tucker Coe. These are very sensitive cop. They're very different. They're not funny. They're not hard-boiled. They're novels, but there's crime involved, and it's a wonderful series. They're not as well known as some of his other books, but they're beautifully written, and anybody who reads these for the first time will be taken aback by what a wonderful series it is. He was published by Random House, by Simon and Schuster. Quite a few books were published. This is a Random House book. And as I think I've told in another case, this is an early series where it shows first printing. If there is a second printing, it would say second printing. Bank Shot, that's one of the books that was filmed. But I also brought along a book that is, this is his first hardcover publication, his first crime novel, and this is the first new direction in the tough mystery since Hammett. So we got off to a nice start. This is a very, very uncommon book to get in nice condition. It was printed on cheap paper by Random House. I don't think they had very high hopes for it because it was very cheaply produced, and to get a really nice copy in really nice shape is extremely difficult. $375, it tells you how difficult it is. I brought along, let me show you something. When we were showing books around the office, Charles said, "Oh, there's a racy cover." Well, Don was no newcomer to racy covers. He wrote more than 20 paperback original softcore porn novels. He and Lawrence Block, collaborated on some of them. They had house names that they interchanged. They were young writers trying to earn a living as writers, and these were easy to do. And so they could write a full-length porn, softcore porn. Porn in those days is not like today. It would almost be a mainstream novel today. They were so unpornographic. But that's how they earned a living. They got $2,000 or $2,500 and could write a book in a week or two. And that's how he started out as a writer and learned his craft. This is a book that I just have to show because it kind of got me in trouble. It's his biggest Dortmunder book, and I was reading the manuscript of this book on my way to a sales conference. So I was on the plane, and I was reading it, and there's a scene in the book that is so funny. I burst into laughter. And okay, I burst into laughter with Westlake on many occasions because he is truly a hilarious writer. but I couldn't get it out of my mind. And I'm sitting next to this guy, and he's looking at me like I'm a nutcase. And so I'm trying to get it past, and so I'm reading the next couple of pages, and then the scene flashes back into my head, and I burst into laughter again. And I felt bad for him the whole trip. And finally, I had to introduce myself, tell him who I was reading and why this was so funny. And he said, Donald Westlake, he's my favorite writer. So this, although it's not a rare book, but I wanted to show it anyway, just because that moment, it's $20 first edition. So it's possible to collect a lot of Donald Westlake very inexpensively, because in this store particularly, he's such a favorite that I bought 3 large collections of Donald Westlake books within about a 6-month period, 5-month period. And so I have several shelves of autographed and non-autographed first editions of Donald Westlake. In order to put together a complete collection of Westlake first editions would take a very, very long time. Some of the books are very obscure. The two most obscure is, one is wrote a children's book called Philip, which nobody's ever heard of. And the other one that is so obscure is a book called Comfort Station by J. Morgan Cunningham. And what's very cool, it's a paperback original. Nobody knew how to categorize this book because it's a parody of big thrillers like Hotel, when all these movies were being made of ships and hotels catching fire and all of that. This was called Comfort Station, and it was a parody of that. And it had quotes on this book. It had quotes from Donald Westlake, Tucker Coe, Richard Stark, each in their own style. So if you're looking for a really obscure book, that's one to get. Donald Westlake, Grand Master for the Mystery Writers of America, who won 3 Edgars in 3 different categories. Best Novel for God Save the Mark, Best Short Story, and Best Screenplay, which was a screenplay based on Charles Willeford's book. Donald Westlake.
Okay.